Harold, tell me your full name, date of birth, and that sort of thing.
I am Harold Edgar Wadley, January 16th, 1934.
And where were you born?
In a place out in the boondocks called Berry Hill, Oklahoma. Just on the old Cherokee Reservation. Part of my family on one side, Cherokee Comanche mixed.
So you do have some Native American background.
I'm about a third.
All right. So how did you happen to come to the Stanley base?
I was district ranger down in Utah, and I'd always expressed interest to get back to Idaho. My grandpa and two of his brothers stayed about, they were the Indian side, Cherokee Comanche guys, and they left Indian Territory 1896, and you drove through our old homestead at Medicine Lake. They came out and homesteaded at 160 there until the 1910 burns run them out, and some of them died at Kellogg later, and then my grandpa went back to Oklahoma. They came out on a train with a wagon, lumber wagon, and mules and horses. And when the train quit, they unloaded the horses and mules, and that's where they ended up. So to get back, I'd heard stories about Idaho all my life, and my dad, and born there in 1900, there at Medicine Lake. So he was kind of getting back, and the district opened up at Stanley. Those were the days when the Forest Service recruited based on horsemanship ability, outdoors, how you were raised and whatever. He ended up there, and the range staff officer on the Wasatch Force at that time was J.D. Hanson, my old best mentor I could ever had. And so that's, I left that district and came to Stanley in the winter of 60 to 61, I guess.
And how many years had you been in the Forest Service by that time?
Oh, since 58, 3 years.
So in 3 years you went from employee to ranger?
Yeah, because the ranger in Utah had been threatened with his life and shot at.
Oh, wow.
Over grazing allotment reductions. They're on the high desert Tooele. And they figured I was just out of Korea. And of course I'd been wounded in Korea, shot up and stuff. And they said, well, he's our best bet. And I thought, man, they're scooping to the bottom of the barrel. And so that's how I got to district. And old J.D. Hanson, who'd been on the chalice, super duper guy. Yeah, he briefed me before. He said, now listen. His word said, it's a hornet nest at Tooele. And he says, we had 18 cattle and sheep allotments, and all of them were to be reduced. Mm-hmm. And he said, the ranger there does not ride with the people. He's afraid of them. He was surrounded at a gas station with guys beating on the hood of his truck, daring him to get out of the truck. So he drove through them to get away. So, and he said he's been shot at while out on the range, so he will not ride. So that's what you're going into. He said, what do you think about that? Which is very, I just love that old guy. But I said, well, J.D., pass word to him before I get there, don't miss. I ended up super friends with the leader of that bunch. He had played tackle. Jack Johnson was his name. He played tackle 10 years for Detroit Lions. And it ended up I could ride through and leave a tired, worn-out horse in his corral, take one of his, and go on, because it's a 90-mile ride to the south of the deal. I made a lot of those. And I rode with him when they were branding. And so anyway, we just developed that friendship. And I never had problem one after that.
All in your approach in comparison to your friend that was having real issues there.
Yeah.
I think that's the key to being a really, really good ranger, is being able to develop those relationships. And you proved it.
Yeah, it's essential. And
so, were you married when you moved to Stanley? And
Yeah.
you were married when you were there in Utah?
Yeah, yeah, we were married before I got out of college. Gwen graduated and was teaching school.
So when you headed to the Sawtooth Valley, you just loaded up and hauled the horses and hounds and wife, and did you have children at that time? Or?
We had one little boy, Rance Allen, and he was sick. And Gwen was driving a Rambler station wagon, and that was a heavy winter. That winter was a heavy winter, and we had a U-Haul truck. And when she went over Galena and caught a wheel in the edge of the road, and the car went over the side and rolled over about 3 times. And the little baby Rance, he was kind of bouncing around that, and she was stuck down in the snowbank, and one of the Frank Lanier was on the highway crew. And those guys at Stanley, they're the best snow plowers in the world. They'd stand in the back of the cart and shovel sand. They didn't have a sander. They'd shovel it in those days. Well, the Lord took care of that. They truck went up there to turn around, is into their plow zone or something, and they rescued her, pulled her out, got the snow out of the fan belt, and it just packed under the hood. And they followed her on into Stanley to the station.
Wow.
And neither one of them were hurt other than baby, sick and crying.
Sure. Now that's a grand entrance with a lot of help from somebody upstairs.
Oh, you better believe it. Oh, yeah. And I didn't even know it happened. I was coming behind them, and I get into Stanley, and then I get the news, and the state highway crew guys were there, and I thought, what in the thunder are they doing here? Then I got introduced to the Lanier clan. They lived in Upper Stanley. They said they were too good for Lower Stanley. So that's how we arrived in Stanley.
You just had the one son that was an infant or youngster?
He was 6 months old. We had our second boy, Reed, was born there at Stanley 2 years later.
And how did you and your wife like moving into the Stanley Valley Creek Ranger Station?
Oh, it was just kind of like a dream come true, getting to Idaho.
How long were you the ranger in Stanley?
I think it's 7 winters.
7 winters. How did you like the winters in Stanley?
Well, I made 2 winters in Korea in the 5th Marine Regiment. And I know what cold is. And so if I didn't freeze to death in Korea, laying there, I think the coldest the thermometer in Korea on Lieutenant Quinn's thermometer was about 32 below.
That many winters, so your kids got to grow up there in Stanley.
Yep, they learned to swim in hot springs. I think Kovalicki's the one that dozed that full.
The plunge, and Kovalicki is the culprit, and we always give him a bad time about it, but he said he got so sick and tired of the nudity and all that other stuff.
Yeah, but yeah, we'd throw big hunks of snow in it, and the kids would lay on the hunks of snow in it until it melted 104 degrees. And and the other guy who would have, I don't know where Dan Woolley was when Kovalicki had that problem with hippies or that, but there was, he had a bet with, I forget who, Wilbur, he had a bet that he could run and jump his horse over that wall and land in the pool. He jumped his, or started to jump his horse over, and he landed half on the wall.
Oh my.
And it is a wreck and a rodeo. And of course, Dan Woolley didn't care. Nothing fazed him, but he'd fought in Korea too.
Living there at the ranger station, I'm curious what you all did for entertainment.
Yeah, me and Gwen, the kids skied, and we'd snowshoe into Redfish Lake and camp. Just set up a iron pot, wok, and cook spaghetti, whatever, and the kids would play on the ice, and then Jay was younger. If we go to Little Redfish, it had the best ice, and would saw out ice, mark out ice, and then the old filling station down at the bottom of Wilbur. Anyway, he had a big ice house that he sold ice in the summer, just like we did. We filled up the ice house at the station that had the big 3-foot wall, sawdust in them, and so we'd go up there and mark out ice, and everybody have a feast.
And you mentioned the ice house there at the station. Did you put ice in the ice house there at the station? Did you keep produce in it? Did you keep meat in it? What did you...
Yeah, because every 2 weeks, I wish Gwen was here. I think about every 2 weeks there was a good guy came up from Treasure Valley. The kids called him the vegetable man. He had produce and everything, and he knew Stanley's kind of isolated, and so he would bring produce to Upper and Lower Stanley to the house. He'd bring it right, and so Gwen would get corn or squash, whatever. Can't remember his name, super guy. But about, I think, every 2 weeks, so we kept that, and of course meat.
Yeah. So meat, was that game meat?
Yeah, we never bought meat.
Yeah.
We still don't.
So did you go out of the valley much? Did you have a car and go out of the valley?
We had that same beat up old Rambler. We went one time all the way to Boise. The kid somewhere, and we didn't have radio, and it wouldn't work in the station in the house because it was metal laths in the wall with the plaster. And the only time the radio worked, if Gwen pulled the flour bin, there was a tip flour bin, pulled the flour bin out halfway and the radio would work. We don't know how that connection was, but the plug-in was up above and figured the metal some way. So, and that's the only time, of course, we didn't have any need to listen to radio except when President Kennedy was killed in 1962. She happened at noon to pull it out to listen to Farm Report or something, and there was the news that President Kennedy had been shot. And that's how Upper Stanley got the word. But recreation was just outdoor stuff, and of course we trailed all the horses down to Chalice and mules. We had 48 head of mules and 16 head of saddle horses, and we trailed them all down to Chalice.
So when you had that many head, were they on pasture right there by the station, or were they Upper Valley? Or
they were scattered between there and all of the patrol stations, because it patrolled 120 miles of the middle for it.
And so the Seafoam Ranger Station, that was seasonal, correct?
Yeah, we had an illegal guy that the FBI could never catch. He was on the 10 most wanted list, I think. And he would leave us notes. And we rode into Cabin Creek. Down there we had the camp train dealer and work trails, Shorty Conyers and Ed Udale, two of the best people on the earth. Ed was a packer and a rawhide braider and stuff. And Shorty, of course, was a permit art control and trail. And
was he stationed at Stanley there, or?
Yeah. They were all.
That was Shorty Conyers, right?
Yeah, but the Packers cabin at Seafoam is where they generally live. But this old boy, The FBI never did get him. I don't know, I can't remember why they were after him. But he would come in and utilize the cabins, keep them clean and everything, and like I said, at times leave a note. And we rode in on cabin creek, me and Shorty, forget what we were packing in there. But we were right behind the guy, saw him, but never caught up with him. And we said, who could that be at this time of the year? Well, it had to have been that guy. And to this day, unless Bill James or somebody remember later after I left, he was never caught.
So, do you remember any of the particularly cold winters in Stanley? Did the water freeze up, for example, or what was it like keeping the place warm, that sort of thing?
Gwen cooked it a lot with canned milk, and we had a case of canned milk underneath the bed, and when it froze, we closed the door on the bedroom and everything. We moved to we just used one room in the house, closed, because the house would shift, and you couldn't open any more doors after you closed them.
So the kids probably didn't sleep upstairs in the winter. Did they sleep in the dining room, or?
Yeah. But the coldest that next winter, I guess, was the first time anybody could ever remember that the river plugged up with ice and heaved out onto the road, highway. And took out the Casino Creek Bridge. And that was the winter that towards, middle winter, before Christmas, there were 26 slides between Stanley and Chalice. And Christmas figured was over, but did you ever hear of, I want to say, Jack Fleming had one leg, wooden leg. He was the mailman. He carried the stage. He ran the stage.
What was the last name?
Fleming. And then he died later, I guess fell in the river. We never did find him.
Yeah.
But he snowshoed with the Christmas package, one for the kid from Ketchum. He came over Galena Summit, and he knew there were kids in Stanley, and he brought the mail. Now, if you can find anybody else can do that with two legs, and he had that wooden leg, and you'll tease the kids with that wooden leg. You'll kick my leg. And of course, they thought that was a big deal, that wooden leg. But yes, sir. I wanted to say Jack or Harry Fleming.
Harry Fleming would have been like his father, I think, maybe?
Yeah, it could be. It's the older, the one with the wooden leg. And Bill said he drove off into the river later and drowned.
Once you said Fleming, that was a pretty famous family for their mail routes and their freighting. So did Bill and some of the others live in trailers out behind at that time?
And Frank Stillwell and Bill James and their families were year-round there at the station.
Did Bonnie Stillwell work for the forest there too?
Yeah, she came in for a while. The first office manager clerk was Ella Boyle, and that's when we had the switchboard that she managed for all of our phone lines that went to the Sulphur Creek Ranch and to Jones's at Knapp Creek and that, and then ours was 2 shorts and a long, and she had the pegs for the switchboard, so in the winter everybody could talk.
So was the switchboard right there
in the office?
In the office, yeah. Did any elk winter there in Stanley? No. They all pulled out?
We had to hunt hard to find elk.
Mm-hmm.
And we hunted. Yeah, the elk, there just wasn't that many elk at all. So
did your kids go to school? Did they get to school age and go to school in Stanley?
Yeah, Gwen helped. Mrs. Williams was the teacher up in that Quonset hut. And Rance, our oldest boy, the little boy didn't, I don't think read might have started. There was Mrs. Williams was the teacher, but generally everybody, you know, from upper grades all went to Chalice.
Uh-huh. And when they went to Chalice, they lived down in Chalice?
Yeah, they lived with families, stayed with families.
So I don't know if you did any partying or any hanging out uptown at any of the establishments, or in Lower Stanley for that matter. Was there much partying or gambling or people that hung out at the bars?
Well, in the summer, there was the summer crowd, which we were, you know, too busy for that. In the winter, there wasn't but a handful of us, and there would be some card parties, you know, things like that. And Wilbur's Rod and Gun, and Joe Williams had the filling station down in Lower Stanley, and he would have some cronies come in, but it was...
So what drainages were you finding links in?
Well, of course, I webbed all through there in the spring after Bear, and that ahead of Iron Creek was a denning area for lynx.
Mm-hmm.
Always found kittens in that, and the old female, I know I'd treat her, I don't know how many times. There wasn't any road to the highway there, Highway 21 or whatever it is. Me and John Shivers located that road. Now the road is where it is. We pulled all the stakes.
Ah.
It was right up the valley through the tent, trailer, the Triple T of Silva.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
Went right through that, and Bob and Kotze Young that had the home place, the old Mahonies, they were part of the Mahonies.
Yes, yes.
Okay, went right through their irrigated pasture to the sheep holding ground and out. And everybody was, you know, said, what we do. And we had all kinds, that's the Bureau of Public Roads at that time. And there was one guy in an old World War II guy, Harold Tilsey, backed me up, didn't say a word after he found it. And anyway, this story here, and the Stanley Basin Cowboys, the Shivers bunch and Pivas and Bain Stark, Salt of the Earth guys, came to me and says, gosh, he said, what happened at that last meeting? He says, they've surveyed and staked right up to. And I says, well, that's their plan, and had the aerial photos and everything. And so we went out with them and looked and couldn't believe that, gosh, you guys, the only flat ground and meadows and you know, people living here, you got all outdoors to build a road. And so I rode into cow camp a couple of days later, and I said, John, we need to ride. John Shivers was the younger brother of Tom and him.
Mm-hmm.
And so he figured we was going to chase bears. They said, what in the world? What have you got? Where's your dog? I said, no, we don't need dogs. And I had 2 gunny sacks tied on it. He said, what's sacks? And I'll show you. And so we pulled every surveyed stake all the way out to Blind Summit. And I said, now we got a road to locate. And I said, I had my saddlebags full of flagging, tape rolls. I gave him about 6 rolls. I said, now he said, well, that bench over there, and I said, you're right. I said, that's where we're headed. So we went back to Stanley Creek where it came in, and John would ride out ahead, and I'd say, okay, left, right, you know, and so forth. And long story short, we flagged it all the way to Banner Summit.
That is a fantastic piece of history there.
All the way there, and Frank Stillwell and Bill James and I made a template for a 5-inch lodgepole, cut it out of plywood. We marked 2,600 and some holes. That's how the logworm fence got built.
Wow. So on a slightly different subject, where did your family do shopping? Where did you get your you said the vegetable man came in from over the hill, but where did you all go for groceries?
Well, we stocked up. Gwen, the farm girl, stocked up on and canned. She canning stuff there now, and so we can a lot of those things that were brought. And then for what we bought, like a case of Carnation pet milk, Twin Falls.
Twin Falls. Okay, you went to Twin Falls.
Yeah, we went to Twin Falls.
So the store in Lower Stanley, I suppose that was the Markle store then, or?
Yeah, there wasn't much of a store.
Yeah, wasn't much for supplies
Joe
there.
Williams, no, you couldn't get supplies there. Joe Williams tried to bring stuff in the summer at his filling station just for the run of salmon fishermen, but is all towards the fishermen.
Yeah, yeah. Speaking of fishermen, did you all fish for salmon?
No, I honestly never did. But I carried a lot of them out of the horse pasture that come up the irrigation water if we didn't get it shut off. And the big old Chinook, carry them, throw them out and back in the river and then shut. But they'd break the drop boards that we had, that mother stream that they could smell, and they'd hit that thing. And so we had a hard time keeping them out of the pasture there at Stanley. I've seen that thing just salmon all over it. No, but old Frank Church, he demanded fresh salmon there when we were starting Wild and Scenic River stuff. I was involved with that to start with, and whether a national park or a wilderness area, all of that hassle. And so I got a hold of salmon. I said, hey, we got to catch a salmon. You speaking of catching salmon, that's the only one we ever caught. And he said, well, the senator wants a salmon. Of course, it wasn't salmon season. And so we got a big steelhead. So
it wasn't salmon season, but you got him a big steelhead, yeah. And for steelhead, did you have to go down below Sunbeam, or were there steelhead up higher?
Yeah, they'd come right on up. The good place at Torrey's Bend, down through there, the other fishermen, the Dead Man's Rock, they called it.
Yeah, yeah.
The guys that get in a fight and fall off of that rock. But it just wall to wall with fishermen. I couldn't fish like that.
Yeah. Well, that's the way it is now, but now there's getting to be so few fish that there isn't that good a.
Yeah, we could lay in bed there at the station and listen to them make reds in Valley Creek, just flop, flop, flop,
Hear
flop.
splashing.
Yeah, and down at Dagger Falls, sit there and man salmon, just like you see in Alaska.
Down in Dagger Falls, the road was in there when you were there, wasn't it? Yeah.
Came in from Bear Valley.
Bear Valley Road, yeah, right, yes, yeah. So I'm curious, was there a church at all in Stanley?
No, we had one, well, yeah, there was. It used the Quonset hut.
So was there any medical personnel in the valley?
Not to my knowledge.
Was Betty Rember a nurse, do you know?
Yeah, I think Betty was a nurse.
Okay.
But we never had, well, my boy Reed, the second boy was born there, he had a compound fracture of the right femur, and June James we was on a fire and gone, but they was playing up on the old corral gates and stuff, and he got a leg through it and fell over backwards, and he spent time in Sun Valley, and I made him a little sled, like a mechanic sled, with wheels on it, so he could wheel around all in the house until his leg healed.
So there wasn't any resident deputy, they would just come from Chalice?
No, they never came up.
Did you ever hear the stories about Bill Woolley's pet lion?
Oh yeah, Cleo. Oh yeah, she was there, and they got her hauled out, he said, and the story that how he got it, but this author sent him a letter that is sending him a present that pick it up at the railhead and catch him. And then he packed Cleo with a soft chunk of firewood wrapped in her mouth so she couldn't bite, and managed her up and packed her to Stanley. And it killed one of his steers. That's why he got a hold of the zoo at Pocatello. Remember? Said he played that steer, and steer would come up, and she'd stay back on her chain like she couldn't reach it. And then finally she had it measured, and then hit him between. Said, "You've never seen anything drop so fast." But I knew Roger. Roger was his pet black bear. That you go over, of course, that log house of Bill's was low. He'd get in there, and I don't think he had electricity, he had a lamp. And it's dark, and I could smell that bear. And there's old Roger there, and they would sidle up, kind of half asleep and stuff in the winter, and of course with people talking. And he says, "Don't take your dogs up Four Aces Creek." I said, "What's up Four Aces Creek?" He says, "That's where Roger goes."
Oh.
So he said, "Don't run Roger, don't tree Roger." But finally, the reason I don't know, he wouldn't have shot him, but I think he ran him off by shooting at him or something, because he says his table manners got out of hand. And he bit at him one day when they were eating supper together, he said. But Bill Wooley could tell the story to you. His tears run down your eyes, his slow way of saying it, he says. And I reached for mine, and he says, and Roger thought his was better, and he reached for mine too. But he said, that's what happened to Roger. And he died, got a letter years later from Dan, that Bill always went and had a cedar water bucket. He went down to the river, dip water. And at that age in the week, and spring runoff, I think it was, I think it's spring. And I figured that, I think they found his coat there at the river. And no water bucket, so the river took him.
That was like 1973, I believe.
Could have been.
It was the year of the big high flood, big flood year.
Okay.
Yeah. So, Harold, can you tell us a little bit about your military career? You were in the military before, and then Forest Service, and then you went back in the military. Is that right?
Yep. Yeah, I left high school in the 11th grade and enlisted, and 6 of us in our family were Marines. And one of them was shot down on Bougainville. And so, and a lot of them then, at that time when Korea started, there were all these guys getting draft deferments for F'ers, because they needed to be on the ranch or farm. They no more, and they were all, and it just really infuriated me with my cousins and them that just hung saddles in the barn and off they went, And so I got permission to enlist and went on in to Korea with 5th Marine Regiment, and assault demolition, the old satchel charges and pole charges and all of that for assault stuff. And occasionally we were qualified in a lot of things. We got $50 extra a month for the hazardous stuff that we did, which was big money to us. And everybody that was in combat got $25 a month extra pay. I think pay was $127 a month. So we were rich. And so us assault guys got $75. And some of my buddies would fuss about it. We'd say, "We'll trade you."
Yeah.
And that kind of shut down the arguments. But anyway, Vietnam, same thing there. We had all the Jane Fondas and Joan Baez's laying down on the railroad track. I wish he'd laid down from my old green Ford. And Gwen and I prayed about it a lot for a month or more, and said, no, the old guys out of Pacific helped keep me alive. Those guys off of Guadalcanal and Evo were my platoon sergeants in Korea. And I said, I owe these guys. And so I wrote a letter to Commandant General Green and told him, what I felt like doing. And this is 13 years after I was discharged from Korea. And I was 33. And with the family, like I say, the Lord took care of the whole thing, and He got me back too. That's the only way I lived to get out of that. Great bunch. We lost so many.
Yeah. So when you came back, did you go back in the Forest Service, or
when I got back, a lot of hospital time.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
About 9.5 months in different hospitals. And,
Uh-huh.
I wrote the Forest Service to see if they had a position, and they had one in Denver, down in Region 2, to locate a trail from the airport at Denver to Durango, Colorado.
Huh.
They call it Colorado Mountain Trail.
Okay.
And they have it now, but I located that.
And so you retired from the Forest Service,
Yeah.
correct? Yeah, right here in St. Mary's. How many years had you spent in St. Mary's?
I think 12 or 13.
Ah. So what was your favorite assignment in the Forest Service in your career?
Stanley.
Stanley.